This is really a pleasure to be here today, speaking to you guys. I want to lead off by saying, I think that the e-commerce market is changing incredibly fast, and this is the right time to be talking about this. My particular business, we're in groceries, and so I have a unique perspective on this in that I've never been in e-commerce, but I've watched it evolve from the beginning of consumer CPG companies, consumer packaged goods companies starting to sell business to business and business to consumer through various different ways, and how that's all becoming a very, very crowded space, yet these dominant players are emerging. So we're going to talk about that. And the difficulty that I had, really, the challenge in talking about e-commerce was keeping this subject narrow enough, because I really needed to learn a lot about this to prepare myself for this presentation. And so you learn that there's just a vast amount of knowledge and information out there. And so my challenge was always keeping it very, very specific and very, very narrow. So I'll talk a little bit about what we'll talk more specifically about today. But first of all, I just kind of wanted to lead this conversation off. I want to make it very, very conversational. Since I am not the expert, I am certain that there are people in this room that know a lot more about e-commerce than I do. So I think that we can, I won't be able to answer all your questions, I'm sure of that. But if you have them, you can ask them anyway, and we'll see if we can think it through. I think where I will lend a little bit more knowledge and so forth is in terms of a practical application of how businesses are looking in that, or which direction do I think that might go. Because I leave the technical things to the experts, but I really try to look at things strategically and decide where does my company need to be to not get left behind or to take advantage or to make sure that I'm changing with the times. And working for a very ancient company, as you'll find out, comes with those types of issues or challenges, I suppose, is being able to think farther ahead. The company that I represent, which is Marukan Vinegar, it's represented by these products here on the table, and you can see them on the slide. This is what we call the world's finest rice vinegar. We're the oldest company in Japan making rice vinegar. Of course, rice vinegar and vinegar in general is mentioned in ancient history. It's mentioned in the Bible. It's mentioned even before that in ancient Greece, where the ancient Greek philosophers used vinegar to cure as an elixir or as a medical treatment or as a potion. Vinegar, very simply, is a fermented alcohol. So if since the dawn of time, they've been making alcohol, some for consumption and for other purposes, and some of that alcohol naturally ferments, becomes sour. The word vinegar is a French word meaning sour wine. So that's where the origin of it comes from. But our company has been doing it in Japan commercially for 370 years. We just celebrated that anniversary down the street in Paramount back in March. So we've been here for about 45 years. We do have this factory here in Paramount where I work, and it's our U.S. headquarters. There's 2 other factories of Marukan over in Japan. And we recently added a second U.S. facility outside of Atlanta, Georgia. So I spend quite a bit of time in Atlanta as well. Talking about my scope today a little bit, for Marukan, we have about an equal amount of business in both the grocery and the restaurant segment, and then we do a little bit of industrial and export business, but it's very small, and it's not something that we're looking to grow because we focus our capacity and our efforts on the market here in the U.S., and we let the Japan head office with their 2 factories handle Japan and Asia. However, my focus today is going to be on grocery, because I think that's where there's a lot of exciting e-commerce strategies and plays being put into motion. But I do think there's also a tremendous upside for food service as well. And I've had those conversations with some of the service providers that we've talked to about providing some of our being partners with us on e-commerce. So very specifically today, we're going to discuss how home consumers are buying groceries through e-commerce and how that market's really changing. This is a little bit about myself. And this is only meant to provide a background so that you guys can ask me some questions. You'll know more about me and what I am able to answer and what I may not know. But you can always try me. I'm game for anything. So I started working. I'm going to kind of go backwards on my personal timeline here. Yeah, so I began working at Marukan. It's going on 12 years ago now. And I began in the sales department as a national sales manager there of the American division. At Marukan, we have two divisions. We sell to what we call the American division and what we call the Asian division. Asian division is traditional Asian distributors like Japan Food Company, Wismetic, used to be called Nishimoto Trading, specific Japanese primarily distributors that focus on selling Japanese food to a Japanese audience. And then American kind of became everything else. Call it mainstream, if you will. It wasn't meant to be, really national in origin. It was more meant to just classify. It's the JFC and the guys that specifically sell Japanese food as the entirety of their catalog, and then it's everybody else. We get in kind of where we can. So I did kind of get promoted up through the ranks there, and eventually was leading both the Asian and the American division. And then in 2013, the owner of our company, Denzyman Sasada, he's also the chairman and CEO. I'm the president and COO, general manager. They appointed me to that position in general manager in 2013 and president 2014. But prior to that, I did a little bit of a startup in a American-made beer that was targeting the Latino market, and we thought no better place to do that than in Southern California. And we took some lumps in that business, but we learned a lot, made some friends, kind of made an exit as clean as we could, and moved on to the next thing. And that's one of the things that brought me to Marukan. Prior to that, I worked for Advantage Sales and Marketing, which was at that time the largest sales and marketing agency. We were like a contract sales force for larger companies that didn't want to employ specialists for every chain account. When you go with a company like Advantage, or Acosta is now a very large one, Impact Sales is another very large one. These are national brokers that kind of have an expert in every account in every market. So if you want to learn how to sell more business at Ralph's, there's a Ralph's expert there that does nothing but Ralph's, but carries a big bag full of products. And I was that person for Unilever Best Foods, that line, which entailed all of the Lipton and Lawry's. And I also represented C&H Sugar. Herdez, another a small, well, not so small anymore, Mexican food company. Sweet Baby Ray's was a barbecue sauce that I rolled out here. It was the last market in the U.S. where they were, and now it's a very popular sauce. So very proud of that, to have that on my resume. And prior to that, La Victoria Foods was a third-generation family business of mine that was actually helped in part to start by my grandfather, who came over here in the late 20s, early 30s from Germany. And lived a combination of his time in California and Mexico, and doing a lot of importing and exporting, learning the foods that were consumed in Mexico, and then realizing that there was a growing audience here that were looking for things that they couldn't get when they came to California. So as the bodega stores started popping up, it kind of gave the opportunity for La Victoria, with all of its various authentic homemade sauce formulas, to be kind of commercially made in a bigger and bigger plant. And my grandfather, along with my father, built 4 different factories, I think, in various parts of Los Angeles, and grew that business to what it was in 1994 when 98. I joined the company in 94, but in 98 we sold it. At that time I was working as national sales manager there, but held many positions in that company, including kind of working my way up through the plant, which was great because it gave me a good background in operations, more of what I'm doing right now. It's important to understand how plants run, food plants run, and what is important. Of course, like a lot of people, maybe in this room even, bagging groceries was my first real job, and I'm also happy to have had that opportunity, because that teaches you a lot about customer service, but also the grocery business and all of the things that supermarkets carry and how that's changing. So why are we talking about e-commerce today? Why did we choose this topic? I know it's very popular, and I already explained I'm not an e-commerce expert. I want to try to give you the food industry's point of view. I think that's what I can best relate to you today. Food is actually, groceries have proven to be a challenge for e-commerce. It's the largest growing consumer category in e-commerce, but it's among the least developed also. So the growth potential is really very great. And you know, Amazon, who's the leader in e-commerce, has been at it for years. I believe they launched Amazon Fresh in 2007 and still haven't quite got it right. They're still trying to kind of figure it out. Even after they bought Whole Foods, they kind of pulled back out of that. We'll get into more of the details of that later. Again, I want to try to keep the focus on how it's impacting the food industry, companies like mine, and maybe others that you're familiar with or may go to work for. So the market is changing more rapidly than ever, and I believe we're now at a tipping point. I'll show you why that is. You guys are familiar with the concept of tipping point. Malcolm Gladwell wrote that book years ago, and it became a very popular business book. He's one of my favorite authors. I recommend him if you're already studying or very familiar. But Gladwell is really a genius, and so much of it, of what he talks about relates to marketing and consumer behavior that I'm always very impressed with what he writes. I know he's got a new book out, and as I go on vacation this weekend, I will be taking that with me and trying to finish it off. Our own company, Marukan, is actually faced right now with decisions of what to do. A couple of months ago, literally, about the time that we agreed that I would come here and speak about the subject, I was on my website one day, my company website, and realized, wow, when we click the Buy It Now button to go and test that link, it's no longer working. Uh-oh, that's an emergency, right? That's an emergency situation. Hey, we don't have an e-commerce partner, or their link is down, or something's going on. Let's call them. Call them, and of course, couldn't get a hold of them. I'm not going to name names or say anything, but when people are winding down a business, they don't always get to call every client of theirs individually to explain to them what's going on. And obviously, those calls wouldn't go very well anyway. But it kind of put us in a situation where we said, well, okay, now we're looking for a new e-commerce partner. Obviously, I think it's in 2019 and beyond, and of course, this started several years ago. It's going to behoove a company to have a Buy It Now feature on their webpage. I think that's kind of a starting point these days for commerce in general. Give consumers that option. So we want to learn how to be able to do that. So a lot of my research that I've done, kind of went into this presentation, and I hope to learn from your feedback. So that's another reason I want to keep this very two-way if we can. There'll be a point to get to that two-way in just a little bit. I guess I could start with questions. If anybody has any comments or anything to say generally, right off the bat. Yeah.
So how do you balance e-commerce with Amazon, all these other companies that are delivering food that was traditionally picked up in person, with environmental concerns with all these trucks and everything on the road now?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that is a big concern. People aren't as thinking it through as clearly as yourself. It does create a lot of waste. That was I found some of that in the research that I did. If you guys are looking for a hot topic on that, that would be a great one. I would encourage you to go research the waste in e-commerce, see if it's value that versus the traditional supply chain, see if it's better or worse. I would bet that over time it's going to get better. I think that initially the customer service priority is so high because if it doesn't meet that bar, e-commerce would fail. It's clearly meeting that bar. People are happy with it to the point where it's now catching on fire. They're going to have to start altering their behavior now in shipping. And great point, great questions.
It's a huge concern, obviously, here in Southern California. With we still have smog.
Yeah.
It's some of the worst air in the country.
Right.
And it's like a water balloon. I'm sorry. It's like a water balloon. With the port, all this trade coming in, but there's a consequence with the environment. Yeah, sure.
I would bet that it's going to get better, but questions need to be asked and solutions need to be found. There's no question about that. I have seen how the cardboard waste, I've looked at some studies and I don't recall the exact numbers, I didn't build them in the slide, but waste is a big concern. So yeah, keep that in mind, and that would be an awesome research topic for a lot of you guys that have maybe environmental science minors. Like I have 3 kids in school. That wasn't part of my bio, but one of them is an environmental science major and another one is an environmental science major in business. So they would ask the same question. So I think it's right on point. Mm-hmm. So I'm gonna go ahead and move on through because I think it'll prompt more questions. But I really wanted to try to give a brief history of e-commerce. It's hard to do because e-commerce is 40-some years old now. It's hard to believe. It really kind of picked up steam and went along. So I'll try to go through this quickly. Bear with me. Some of this is a little bit interesting and amusing, but I'll go ahead and date myself. It's kind of neat. I started the same year as e-commerce. I was born in 1971. So I'm 47 this year. I'll be 48 this week. Something called the ARPANET was used for the first time, and that stood for Advanced Research Project. It was a department of the DoD to basically create like a private internet before there was the internet. And it was tested out at several research universities. And students between Stanford and MIT, which is back in Boston, actually arranged a sale to test the system and see if it worked. And an author, John Markoff, in his book, What the Dormouse Said, kind of described this as, this was the seminal act of e-commerce. It was the very first thing that we ever transacted over a computer-based network. Do you have any guess of what they sold? Food? Good guess. It was cannabis, of course. I mean, naturally. So anyway, the book, the seminal act of e-commerce, the What the Dormouse Said book, is kind of about the counterculture of how the 60s counterculture kind of influenced the internet. And so I haven't read the book, but I find it to be kind of interesting. It's going to go probably onto my reading list so I can learn more about the early days of this. In 1979, Michael Aldrich was in the UK, and he demonstrated the first online system over there. You're going to see a lot of incidences of very advanced tech, and especially related to the internet, coming from the UK. I would say that the UK was probably the first tech center hub of the internet. Followed in '81, Thomson Holliday's UK is the first business-to-business online system to be installed. That prompted in 1983 the California State Assembly to say, hey, you know what? There's a lot going on with this. We better start to get ahead of this and understand what's coming. Infrastructure is going to need to change. Laws are going to need to change. Resources should be applied. Probably organizations or committees need to be developed. And so they had this meeting in Volcano, California. I thought I knew every place in California. I had to look that one up. That's really out there. I mean, if you were trying to not be found in California, there's about a population of about 160 people, and it's up in the middle of the Sierras. But it looks beautiful. I'm sure there's great biking there. In 1984, a large company in the UK again, Gateshead, Tesco. Tesco is the largest supermarket chain in the UK, is the first B2C online shopping system. Miss Snowball 72, somebody with an early private email account, becomes the first known online shopper in the world. And in '84, CompuServe over here launches Electronic Mall in the US and Canada. It's the first comprehensive e-commerce service here. By '89, now I'm graduating high school, Sequoia Data Comp introduced CompuMarket, the first internet-based system for e-commerce. Sellers and buyers are posting items for sale. So now it's kind of C2C. And this is now they're taking your credit card through the email. Now, keep in mind, it's not secure yet, right? So it's still very risky and very experimental. It wasn't until '90 that Tim Berners-Lee writes the first web browser, www, the World Wide Web. And that's, again, another UK internet pioneer who was kind of putting us on the global standard for how we would do e-commerce and all internet computing in the future. I mentioned this 1992 event of Bookstacks Unlimited in Cleveland, opening a commercial sales website, selling books online with credit card processing. I mentioned that because I believe that must have been some of the inspiration for Bezos with Amazon, who comes along in just a couple years later. Netscape then releases the Navigator browser, which contains a feature that makes transactions secure, which is obviously super important to moving e-commerce along. By '95, CompuServe UK buys a book. To demonstrate that the system works, they demonstrate the CompuServe UK shopping center. And this is the UK's first national online retailer. There's 9 major retailers on there, including like Virgin Atlantic, which was the old record stores back then, and Tesco was involved, the large supermarket chain. '95, Jeff Bezos launches Amazon. At the same year, eBay is founded by computer programmers based as an auction website. Nowadays, over 90% of sales on eBay anymore are actually not auction. They're just for sale. So they've become very much just a regular e-commerce site, not really the auction site that they were intended to be. And I think that they've definitely lost their way. They've got left in the dust by Amazon, who decided to build the infrastructure, the fulfillment centers behind the fulfillment and the e-commerce, getting it vertically integrated. eBay's kind of just remained a service, a site, a platform. In '99, Alibaba groups, that could be a whole separate conversation of e-commerce in China. You know, it's obviously the huge global dominant market. I'm going to keep the focus of the conversation today to the U.S. e-commerce business, but it's notable that Alibaba was formed in China in '99. Also of note, Business.com, a website, sold for $7.5 million to E-Company, which purchased it a couple of years earlier for about $150,000. The reason I mention this is it's kind of an important lesson. If you can own the domain of the thing that you sell, that's a brilliant move. It's something that we discovered and we'd be able to do a couple of years ago when Marukan, when we redid our website about 5 years ago, discovered that RiceVinegar.com was just sitting out there for us, and we went and picked it up for only about $2,500. So I think, much to my competitors' dismay, here I am at a trade show with my new website, RiceVinegar.com, and they're like, oh man. I just loved seeing the look on their face when they recognized that I bought that domain. But it's interesting what happens here a little further down the road. In '99, e-commerce sales kind of start to boil, and they reach a $150 billion level. This is globally. A year later or so, we have a dot-com bust. Booms and busts, you know, they're part of the normal market flow. But what this particular bust did, I think, was it separated some of the winners from the losers. Allowed some of the more dominant companies to buy some of the lagging ones, and kind of narrowed it down and made the strong survive, so to speak. So it was during this time that eBay has the largest user base of any e-commerce site. Alibaba actually achieved profitability. That was probably something that wasn't possible before that bust. And I believe they were the first ones to achieve profitability. eBay then goes and acquires PayPal for $1.5 million. So they integrate kind of that secure payment system into their platform. And then Amazon becomes profitable just a couple of years later. Oh, and then by the way, that same business.com web address now sells for the $345 million. But it's more interesting, I think, to see who it sells to, the phone book company, because they basically had to trade their business and say, we've got to go a different direction. We've got to get into something else. Now, I don't know how successful business.com is today. I know that it does a lot of business services and legal and forms and things. I don't know that much about it. Hopefully, it was worth the investment, but I can tell you it's doing better than the phone book is. So you may have noticed there, I cited Wikipedia a lot. And as you guys know, you're research students, you write papers. You got to be careful with Wikipedia. I tried to only take out those milestone points in time where it referred back, and I could definitely verify that event happened. But there were a few things that I noticed were missing from that timeline that I think are really important. In 1998, Google came along. Google's a giant. For what they're lacking in e-commerce capability, they more than make up for in having our information, right? Collecting and utilizing that data information. It's a search engine, but it's much, much more than that, because I remember when it first happened, and this is right before the dot-com bust, values of these stocks were going higher and higher and higher, and people were investing so frantically they didn't know where to put money. Anything they could get their hands on, they were buying, driving prices way up. The critics, people like Warren Buffett, were saying, if I don't understand how it makes money, I'm going to stay away from it. And some of that, I think, contributed. You know, obviously that's just one man's opinion, but he's a very important man in the stock market. And I think that people did realize that things got a little bit overvalued. But very soon after that, Google proved it could make money as an advertiser, utilizing that information and getting it to the people that could benefit and the businesses that could benefit the most from it. Also, during this time of e-commerce explosion, in 2004, Facebook's launched or invented. It opens to the public in September of 2016. These two companies are now the two leading advertisers in the world, or the media companies that earn the most revenue from advertising. Very interesting. I have a slide at the end that kind of quantifies that, but I'll just touch on it now. In 2006, Amazon launches Fulfilled by Amazon, FBA. So they basically split their company and say, no longer are we selling e-commerce for ourselves and fulfilling it, but we've got this warehouse and it's vast. It's more space than we need. In fact, we're going to plan to build more of them. We're going to let everybody else come in here and share space too. So if they're trying to sell and do what we're doing, rather than compete with them, we're going to do it for them and take a fee. So that was kind of earth-shattering, because I think the mentality in most businesses at the time would be, try to squash the little guy, try to squash the little guy. Amazon just opened up and said, come on in. We want you to partner with us. And by doing so, they created what they call in business a moat. Made it very, very difficult for the next competitor to try to do the same thing. In 2007, the first generation Apple iPhone came out. Most e-commerce shopping is done on a cell device now. And at the time when this device came out, a lot of the old school phone companies, the Palm Pilots, the Blackberries, if you remember your parents talking about those things, were saying, the PC guys will never be able to launch a phone. And what they didn't realize was that the PC guys weren't really launching a phone. They were launching a PC that fits in your pocket. It just happens to have the phone on it as an app. And all of those other apps made it so expandable that it's now the easiest device to use in our lives, you know, probably even easier than our cars and everything else that we own. So it greatly helped on the e-commerce. And then I would say it almost looks like about 10 years post the dot-com bust, there's another kind of revival, and the dominant companies then start gobbling people up. There was a period between 2010 and 11 where Google acquired 2 companies per month on average. So yeah, over 50 companies, well over 50 companies got absorbed into Google. A lot of it was products, a lot of it was services and sites, and just, you know, ideas that they acquired and purchased and took ownership of. And they didn't stop there. They were doing a lot of buying before that, and they continued to do a lot of acquisition, you know, up to this day. So these are now what's called Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google, commonly called the Big Four tech companies. Now this is where I really have to say, this is where we're narrowing it down into my scope of the presentation. So thanks for bearing with me through all that history and all that hubbub, all this ancient history 10 years ago. More recently, going back about 3 years, there's these big 3 developments are what I think is going to change e-commerce for grocery. It's already been changed for electronics and household goods and pet food, almost as far as it's going to go. Obviously, it's going to continue to go farther, but that's, you know, that boom has been seen, that explosion has happened, and now we're kind of reaching that plateau where they're growing steady double-digit figures every year. Double-digit growth in grocery is really going to mean something, and it's going to lead to some hyper double-digit growth, which is going to, you know, bring everybody in. These 3 events, I think, are contributing to that the most, and I want to go into depth on these a little bit. So in 2016, there's a Walmart purchases Jet.com. May have been the number 3 or 4 at the time e-commerce platform, but they buy it for $3.3 million, probably because Jet is starting to get lost in all of the traffic of Amazon, Alibaba, and everybody that they have to compete against. So they buy it for somewhat of a song, and they use it to improve the platform for Walmart.com. Let's take a look at what that looks like. I think before we look at the bullets on that, we have to understand who the players are. So Amazon over here, there's a bullet pointer, has lost a little bit of market share. This is a year ago, and this is current as of pretty recent information here. So Amazon remains huge, and all others remain huge. But these other second place guys are all vying for more of this share. They're not going to get it from here because this is so fragmented. This is a lot of sellers. A lot of these guys are FBA clients that are selling the product on Amazon, but this is their own line. Instacart is a grocery service provider, delivery service provider. Walmart, you can see in the last year, has jumped it, tripled their business. Chewy, which is pet food, vertically integrated, is increasing. Kroger's increasing, and I mentioned that. Even Target is increasing. So everybody's kind of going for the piece of the pie here. That's 2 years ago comparison to current. I apologize. And there we are. So they're using it to prove the platform for Walmart.com. That was, in my estimation, the simplest way to describe that purchase. Most analysts agree that Walmart paid too high a price for Jet.com, because really what they did was they took on their senior management staff, the people knew how to write the programs and optimize the platform. And they took the tech of it, of course, and they integrated a lot of it into the backbone of what Walmart.com is. I think they were trying to bolster their in-house e-commerce with that tech know-how. Mark Lord, the Jet.com founder, is now the president of Walmart's U.S. e-commerce business. In my opinion, Walmart would have had to spend a lot more than $3 million to get to where they are today if they'd started 3 years ago without purchasing the Jet.com platform. We also talked about the Amazon purchase of Whole Foods Markets. John Mackey, president of Whole Foods Markets, been around for a long time, 25, 30 years at the time. No, longer than that. Somebody asked him in an interview, well, what's going to happen when Amazon tries to get into food? And he said that's going to be Amazon's Waterloo, obviously referring to Napoleon's famous defeat in, I believe, 1815. Lo and behold, 2 years later, he's got to call Jeff Bezos his boss. That transaction was worth $13.7 billion, and it raised all kinds of questions. I'll remember being in my office the week that happened, and when that all went down, the news was so big, and people started to speculate, right? Does Amazon really want to own stores? These guys are supposed to be the non-brick and mortar company. Stores are, that's the old way of doing things. You want delivery. So why would they do this? Do they really want to own stores? Well, they do, and they don't also, and it's mostly that they don't. But the value was there. They needed to build in integration for grocery e-commerce that wasn't there before. Buying Whole Foods gives them a first best customer type of relationship with a supermarket chain that had 450 stores across the United States, all of the major markets, places where Amazon was already very strong. To understand why they did this, it helps to understand their mission going all the way back to 1997. And they wrote it in some of the founding documents of the company at Amazon. They wanted to be the leading online retailer of information-based products and services with an initial focus on books. Very specific. But you got to pick up on its initial focus on books. Didn't mean that was where they were going to end. Why would they start with books? Books are almost the opposite of groceries. There are more books than you could ever store in a warehouse. I think their commercials and their advertisements back in those days used to talk about that. So it's no wonder they haven't had challenges. Books are perfect for an online retailer, whereas groceries are lots of problems. Groceries have a shelf life. They go bad. There's more. There's less unique about them. You have choices. If you want to buy a specific book, you can't substitute that book for another and say, well, this isn't exactly the same, but read this and you think you like it. And it has to be the book that you're looking for. With groceries, you're hungry. Almost anything can solve that problem. You have lots of choices, and all of them will work as solutions. They refine that mission statement a couple years later to say that they want to be the Earth's most customer-centric company, build a place where people can come and discover anything they might want to buy online. So anything they might want to buy online, that's very broad. That's the vision of a company who discovers that wow, there are really no limits here. We can sell anything. As a matter of fact, maybe even that's not broad enough, because they launched in the early 2000s Amazon Web Services, AWS, to create all of this backbone internet content, website building, data storage, data management, all of these services that Amazon provides. And they said, we can just drop the whatever people want to buy online and just say, we want to just be the most customer-centric company on earth. And that's their present mission statement today. So if they're going to be that, the Whole Foods purchase was a very small price to pay to basically say, this is our beachhead that we have to defend in grocery. So Ben Thompson, I think, said it best. In a lot of my research, some of the stuff that he's written in his podcast and his blog post is stratechery. He was one of those guys that wrote one of those articles right after that happened. And he said, if you really break down what their mission statement is, Amazon's goal is to take a cut of all economic activity. I would say online, but then, well, maybe not even online, because everything is online at some point. So with Amazon Web Services, they get a piece of that as well. So that's pretty fascinating. That's why they're quickly becoming, just a monster. There was too much value for Amazon to pass up here. It was a brilliant acquisition. You compare it, a year later to the $3 billion that Jet.com got bought for at Walmart. You almost go, wow, this was a bargain. Now, this is a very interesting one. Kroger, nation's largest supermarket chain, second largest retailer to Walmart. Walmart's the largest company in the world, so obviously very, very formidable. $500 billion in sales revenue that Walmart has per year, making them the biggest company in the world. Do the math on that, and it's $15,000 in transactions per second, 24 hours a day, and it's growing all the time. Unbelievable. It's almost $1 million an hour. Yeah. But Kroger is number two. It's a distant number two. But in the United States, they have a little bit less than 3,000 stores, about 2,500, 2,400 supermarkets. Ralph's and Food for Less are some of the ones you may be familiar with. And they partnered with a company called Ocado just last year. Ocado, I was fortunate enough last year to see, and it's very early. Well, it's been operating in the UK for a while. And now I'm coming back to where that history is showing itself, right? Because the UK spent so much time developing the e-commerce platforms and the website themselves, it enabled a company like Ocado to start around the year 2000 and really establish themselves as the world's largest online-only grocer. They're a grocer that doesn't have any stores. And that's now differentiated from Amazon, who does have stores. And not only do they have the Whole Foods stores, but they've tried and experimented to open other stores, like the Amazon Go. You've heard of maybe in the newspaper, the cash register-less stores, the stores of the future, where you're just going to be able to walk in, get what you want, and you walk out, and it's automatically going to bill you as long as you've got your payment method in your pocket. It knows who you are. But it is very significant when the leading supermarket company, at least for my business, the leading supermarket company in the United States partners with the largest online company in the world. They're trying to do it both ways, not just one or the other. They have a partnership now to build 20 warehouses in the U.S. in the next 3 years. But these are not just any ordinary warehouse, and that's what I want to show you here. This is what an Ocado warehouse looks like, and obviously this is right on YouTube, so you guys can go and learn more about it and see what the technology looks like. But it's several levels or layers, 4 or 5 stories, all of palletized product that comes off of trucks at the back of the warehouse, which would be up on the top right, and then works its way through the system. And this is what they call a hive. So they're building warehouses in ways now that are filling up the entire capacity of the warehouse, not just using the floor, but building from the floor and going up in the hive, making it 3-dimensional. So products can be automatically picked by these robots. Each one of these warehouses has about 1,000 of these robots, I'm understanding. They travel, laterally, vertically, dropping stuff into bins and picking stuff out of bins, basically moving product to the other. Color-coded, they operate on a 4G wireless network inside the building that's all its own, so that these things can talk to each other and know which robot is doing what, so they're assigned to a task. It's going to make the closest robot go and pick up whatever it's near after it completes its last order. Obviously everything is automated. It knows when the batteries need to be charged and what it has to do for maintenance. There's lifts underneath that bring these crates up. These crates are then lowered down, packed into an actual grocery order that somebody has made at home, either on their phone, and they're going to now try to beat this thing home from work. And good luck, because it's probably going to be on your doorstep by the time you get there. It's been very successful in the UK. Now, the UK is not the United States. We have our challenges here with geography and distance. Things have to travel a long way, and there we are. Things have to travel a long way to get where they are. Nobody can probably do that better than Kroger, because there's stores in almost every market. About half the states, or 35, I think, states are covered by a Kroger branded supermarket. So once these warehouses are built up, I feel like they're going to be very vertically integrated to service the consumer either through stores or through e-commerce. So I'm going to kind of tie this up here. We've given a lot of information by giving you the manufacturers, the distributors or the wholesalers, and the retailers' perspective of what's happening in e-commerce and what's going to drive it to change even further. Why I feel like we're at the cusp of a change right now. Almost every grocery manufacturer, like myself, with a market for their product, is being delivered through e-commerce one way or another. You know, these products, you know, I'm testing it all the time. I'm going on when I hear about a new e-commerce platform, wonder if they sell my product, wonder who they're getting it for. It's very difficult to find out, but these are questions that I even have to answer for myself and say, do I need an e-commerce partner? Right now, if I get one, it looks like we'll just be competing with a lot of people that are already buying my product from somebody I'm selling it to and figuring out how to get it on Amazon or some other way. So I could kind of choose to compete, or I could choose to not compete and let it go back. But what I don't want to do is get left behind. If my competitor who sells another type of rice vinegar finds out a better way sooner than I do, then you know I'm at risk. Does e-commerce level the playing field? Maybe, you know, not favoring the top brand and making it easier for a smaller brand to get in? I think to some extent that it does, but I also think that if you have a good store presence, consumer awareness and brand image is already high, then it's going to put you higher up the category rankings and the Google searches and other things. And that's where you know, Google and Amazon, with the back end that they've built to optimize these searches. Now, a lot of the controversy that's happening right now with Amazon is that they say, well, I wonder if Amazon's really playing fair. Do they favor certain sellers over others? Is it going to become a pay-to-play type of a scenario? And I think indeed to some degree that it is. There's no doubt. More people suspected this after the purchase of Whole Foods, because Whole Foods also provides a rice vinegar in a private label, Amazon branded package, basically. So Amazon is doing a lot of tests with their own private brand. They call them own brands. Of course, then the Whole Foods label has an own brand, so to speak, with 365 label that the consumers are already, some, you know, already recognize as a high quality, good product. And so, is it possible that they would optimize that ahead of a competitor's product? Well, I would. I mean, you know, let's be honest. So that's another challenge that we have to figure out how to defeat. Lesser known brands can develop faster if they are well marketed online and have attractive features and benefits. I think that's the key, is you're going to have to tell a story better than others do of why you need this one over this one. People are using Amazon for research. They're going there for information to do the shopping, to compare. It truly is shopping. It's not just buying. It does penalize the slow and the inflexible. One of the potential e-commerce partners that I've already talked to looks at this glass package and says, wow, you know, these Amazon fulfillment centers are very high tech. Ocado's building, or Kroger's building 20 of these Ocados in the United States. There are 300 Amazon fulfillment centers throughout the world, you know, most of which are in the United States. A glass bottle product that's, you know, packed by somebody else and coming through their system, it scares them to death. Because if this, you know, falls out, breaks, goes through the tape on the bottom of the box, that line could go down for just 10 minutes and they could not ship 10,000 units that day as a result of a little bit of a delay on the line time. So they can't afford to be cleaning up messes in there. They have to make sure everything's very secure. And to your point, sir, this is a big problem, is they overprotect the packaging. So yeah, there is a lot of cardboard waste, a lot of extra plastic that goes into there. They ask, oh, can you put it in a plastic bottle? If you can, it's a slam dunk. No, don't want to put it in a plastic bottle. Not as recyclable, not as user-friendly. We think of our product like a wine, so we want it to be, we want it to be in a glass bottle, not in a plastic bottle. So there are some penalties to be paid for the inflexible. We have to get through those hurdles. A product like this one, which is harder to find in stores. This product is probably in 50 or 60% of American supermarkets. This one might only be in 5%. So when a consumer loves this product, but it's harder to find in stores, they're going to expect to pay more for it. And I've seen this out there for $30 sometimes a bottle, when it should not be more than $5.99 in a store. And you can go to Whole Foods and find it for that. So Amazon just hasn't figured that one out yet. That's what the e-commerce partner will help me do. Market that lesser selling item, and that's where that thing has the bigger opportunity. So yeah, I do think that there is, not only for brands, but for products further down the sales list within a company, you can optimize your selling more by just going more e-commerce focus on the slower moving items. A couple predictions that I made about the time that these mergers were happening was that someday there might only be two stores, Walmart where you go to shop and Amazon where you go to order. And then it turns out Walmart buys Jet and Amazon buys Whole Foods, and now they're kind of commingled. And we've demonstrated what Kroger's done to counterpunch. I think that there will be more, obviously, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. Another prediction I made, I think this is one of the smarter things I've ever said. If you're not Alexa's favorite brand, she's not going to give the second place brand much credit, right? Alexa, buy me rice vinegar. You're going to need to be optimized in Google search. So from the time we re-engineered our webpage a few years back, I built in a lot of SEO. I didn't do it, obviously. We asked for it to be really SEO optimized. That's really a standard requirement these days for the website. We have to watch out for the Amazon monopoly pay to play. I think that these other competitors who are getting a lot better at e-commerce are going to help us through that. But also, you got to remember that Amazon's philosophy has been to kind of let everybody in and everybody play, because they can beat people by taking costs out of the system for themselves. These e-commerce partners I'm talking to are saying, you can deliver to Amazon's fulfillment centers if you want to. You can quote them a delivered price, but they're happy to pick up as long as they're picking up quantity, because there's trucks all over the road and nobody has lower rates. And I believe that. I'm not going to challenge you on that one. So, like I said, I think that the goal for most of the manufacturers and our ultimate perspective is we just want to do it better than the other guys doing it. So this gives you an idea before we go into the wholesaler's perspective of what categories sell the most. And I did talk about, we'll look at this very quickly, vitamins, pet supplies are up there. Home and personal care is way up the list, conditioners, fragrances. Currently, only 3% of edible grocery sales, food, globally are sold online. That's probably, well, it might be a little bit higher, but it's probably no more than 4 if you just look at the U.S., because there are some countries where, Ocado, the UK's really got it rolling, and it's doing well over there. Experts are saying we can expect about a 16% compound average growth rate for the next 5 years. That's what they're saying that we should expect. Certain categories I think will be higher. Ones with more problems probably be lower. But I think that sounds low to me. I think that we've proven that we've seen that we're really on the cusp of this bubble, and it's going to start to move. From the wholesaler's perspective, I think very much so it's currently Amazon and everybody else. And everybody else is also, a large chunk of everybody else is already competing alongside of Amazon on their own platform. So it makes it very, very difficult for anybody else to ramp up and get involved. Walmart is trying. With Jet, they're very much trying to make Walmart.com a fulfillment-based. And where they're banking a lot of their growth and their success is on having stores order at home and pick it up at the store on their way to their house. They're going to go with that. Jeff Bezos knows this. Walmart knows this. Lower prices are never going to go out of style. People are always going to want to continue to pay more. That's not going to change. That's going to be true for years to come. Walmart's proven that they're very, very good at that. So they'll figure out a way to take out costs and make it good for the consumer. We talked about how they do. Amazon acts as both a competitor and a solution. Being specialized can be a strength. In other words, specialty distributors. Our biggest customers at Marukan are specialty distributors. Like they either focused in the natural food channel to the Whole Foods or the Sprouts markets, or they focus on the Japanese consumer that looks for things that are made in Japan or associated with companies from Japan. So it's either ethnic specialty, health food specialty, vegetarian, vegan, plant-based is becoming much, much bigger. Sustainability is becoming much bigger. So people are having more reasons than just the product itself to look and to make the purchasing decision. Being a specialized distributor, maybe that could be where it comes from. The next big thing could be the company that makes e-commerce green. So as I had mentioned, our e-commerce partner went out of business. They cited the reason for, we just couldn't compete with Amazon. I had a few calls from her prior to her closing up shop and just saying, why do you guys sell so cheap to Amazon? We don't even sell to Amazon. I don't think we were the only ones. She was frustrated at seeing other people were able to do it, somehow find ways to take costs out of the system, or bundle the purchase with other things, sell at lower minimums, and just basically beat her, and she wasn't able to survive. It would have been even worse if we did sell to Amazon and she chosen to do it herself. The retailer's perspective, there's three types of grocery chains. The largest ones are developing their own systems, like Walmart and like Kroger. The mid-sized ones are partnering with Instacart. And for the most part, that's working very well. A couple weeks ago, I met with a 100-store chain that's in the Northeast, north of Boston, or in and around Boston area. They told me that adding Instacart within the past year was like building the revenue of a new store without building the store. So they replaced one full store in volume without having to have a store, employees, or anything. So they're happy. They're liking it, and it's providing an online consumer e-commerce option for their loyal customers. Independent stores and niche grocers, think about like the Gelsons and the Bristol Farms. Or even, what's so popular around here is the Northgates and Hispanic retailers, the El Supers. These guys have to create a niche. You're going there because I really like this salsa. I really like this. And that's harder for global e-commerce companies to get their heads around. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for local companies to continue to do a better job merchandising to their customers because they understand them better. And so they need to do a better job on the in-store experience. I think that there will be opportunities where you'll see that kind of merge, where those operators will become better e-commerce sellers. We talked about the store pickup for Walmart. Fresh produce and meat, that's going to be the last frontier. Now, it's already happening. Ocado is already doing it. Amazon Fresh has existed here for a long time. It's basically an additional subscription to your Prime membership. But even that is sputtered, and they've pulled back on it and said, this is not really working. And in the true style of Amazon, when something doesn't really work, they just stop doing it for a little while until they can figure it out, and they take a different course. They don't consider it a failure. They consider it a learning. That's an amazing company that way, and I think that the leadership there is very strong, and they're very determined to fulfill their mission. We talked about the challenges here. You've got the Rocky Mountains in the middle of the country, so shipping things coast to coast is tough. You have to have fulfillment centers everywhere and stores or, last mile distributors close to your consumer bases. And the human factor is always in business the hardest thing to control. E-commerce has the advantage here because they can replace humans more easily. Not completely, but more easily in more places. A little bit of an eye chart. We'll go through it fast. But basically what this says is if you talk to retailers, wholesalers, and manufacturers like myself, on the first two categories on product knowledge, they'll feel like, we have the advantage over Amazon. On pricing and product choice, they'll be more closer to a 50-50. Sometimes Amazon has the advantage. They do a good job. Sometimes they don't. On fulfillment and shipping and user technology, Amazon's definitely got the advantage. So we know our own product. Pricing, it's a toss-up. On fulfillment and shipping, we can't touch them. That's basically the lesson that you learn from that one. So what's going on with the rest of the big four? We talked about Walmart and we talked about Amazon a lot. Talked about Kroger some. But remember early on we mentioned Google and Facebook. These are enormous platforms, and it only makes sense that at some point they'd always have the the ability to enter the market. Google's a search engine, a data collection, a service provider that makes most of its revenue, happens to make most of its revenue on advertising now. They're collecting ads, ad money, to serve on when you're doing web searches or to optimize your website and get it closer to the top of the list in searches. That's where most of their revenue nowadays is coming from. And they're the largest media channel in the world because they really essentially created a channel. Facebook has followed along. What started as social media has really become an advertiser. They're testing a marketplace that I don't know if any of you have been on it, and there's less and less Facebook users kind of all the time as people going to Insta and Snapchat and other things. But it's kind of hokey. It's kind of wonky and weird. It's almost like here's something. Maybe you want to buy it or maybe you want to look at it. It's raw. It's not in any developed state yet. The other thing about I forgot to mention that Google is launching a marketplace. What makes Google different than Amazon is they realize they're way too late to the game on fulfillment. They want to try to do it through other people's fulfillment and just surrender that part of the margin, which is a disadvantage, but they'll save all that cost and they won't be like Walmart insisting that they go head-to-head fulfillment center for fulfillment center. One of the interesting articles I read, and I'll just kind of add this in, is that if you go back 20 years ago, Amazon had the 20 fulfillment centers. I may have this backwards. And Walmart are 10 fulfillment centers. And Walmart has 20 now. So yeah, they have twice as many as Amazon did 20 years ago. But the thing is, it took Amazon like 10 years to go from 10 to 20. That would have been the best time for Walmart to jump in. Instead, they were like 10 years too late. They built their 20 fulfillment centers when Amazon already had 300. So it was just a mistimed effort, but they tried to catch up with that Jet acquisition. And then where does that leave Apple as the other part of the big four? Still a hardware computing company. They extend to media with Apple TV, iTunes, and cloud storage. But I would not expect Apple to just say, we need to be an e-commerce company. They're not going to change that way. Their devices are critical to this whole operation happening, and I think that's where they're happy to make that space. Here's a little example of Google and what I'm talking about. They laid low for so long, that last 4 years of only having 30 sellers on their site, and now all of a sudden, and this is why I think that we're at the tipping point. When you see this activity over the last year and a half, where now at the end of last year, Google's adding sellers at a rate of 30 per week, that tells you something's happening. A little bit about Facebook as a media company. This slide actually came out of another presentation I gave on media spending and how internet advertising actually surpassed television in 2018. So fascinating when you think that they get $2.5 million for a Super Bowl spot. All that little $20 and $50 internet advertising is in sum killing it. And it's not just the 20 and 50, it's thousands and millions of dollars that the big CPG companies are now saying, this is what my digital advertising budget needs to be, because that's the channel people are paying attention to. Bunch of tech trends. It would be too long to get into all of these, I think. But you can see that there's a lot of things here. 5G technology is upon us. It's going to speed things up. Automated vehicles is obviously, drones are going to make e-commerce much easier. Alternative energies and battery technology, blockchain, AI is already being used. What do you think the next generation social media is going to be? Because it won't be Facebook forever. I mean, there was MySpace for a while, and it left. Probably Facebook, that could happen someday. So wonder what it will be. I think maybe more interactive. Facebook, what I noticed, my criticism of it is very static. You look at it and, oh, I'm seeing something that happened some time ago, but it doesn't put me in the moment. Maybe something with virtual reality in the future will put us more in the moment. I want to be there. And then, you put the VR on and you can be there. I don't know. We have to think about it because it'll happen. And then at some point, when you're there, somebody will sell you something because that's just what we do. And then eventually, these computers are going to become a part of us. That gets a little freaky, and I really don't want to talk about it. So I'm going to wrap it up right there and just open it up to some questions and see if you guys have any thoughts or comments. Go ahead.
If I were to get into the e-commerce as like a new business, So what would be like the best avenues for advertising through the internet, like specifically, and now how much does that investment translate into profits?
You know, really hard to say. There are millions, hundreds of millions of e-commerce sellers. So it would be nothing new to say I want to be an e-commerce seller. If I was going to be courageous and bold and enter that environment, and it might not be a bad idea to do, because it's kind of low risk. The barriers to entry were already paid by Amazon. So they're letting you now be a part of their platform. You just have to know that you're going to compete with their offering. So I think what you have to do is you have to look for things that they're not selling or not selling very well. You know, one example would be this. You know, I've seen this out there for $40 and it should cost $5. So find things like that. I think become a specialist instead of a massive generalist, and you can probably find areas of success. And I think that's what the millions of FBA vendors are doing, or sellers are doing on Amazon. Yeah. Anybody else have any comments or thing to add to that? Have you had anybody in here selling anything on Amazon right now as an FBA, or have you worked with anybody, know anybody? Want to tell a story? Somebody is. A couple hands. Okay. How about questions for CPG, food companies, manufacturing? Yeah.
Question just read lately about the last mile being key to Amazon's success.
Yeah.
And really making it difficult for everyone else to catch up, because when they catch up, Amazon's already doing something else.
That's right.
Maybe you could talk about the next 2 or 3 years and what's happening there.
Yeah, his question or comment was where Amazon's really getting a competitive advantage is in what they call the last mile of delivery to the home. And what they've done to raise the stakes, it's everybody daring everybody to deliver it faster. Not only do they want it cheaper, they want it faster. If you have the choice of 2 sites and one can deliver free for 1 day, one can deliver free in 2 days, same item, you're going with the 1 day. So 2 day used to be the standard. Now it's 1 day Prime. They can't do it quite everywhere on everything, but they know when it is, and they're adding more items for Prime all the time. So what does Amazon want to have? Even more important than low price is selection, and selection of things that are 1 day Prime. And so they're doing that, and you're seeing the Amazon trucks driving around. And they're doing it any way they can because they want to fulfill their mission. They know that they need to be the most consumer-centric company. So I've talked to people and said, what have your e-commerce experiences been like? They're like, well, for one thing, I got rid of my Costco card. And I was like, wow, that's a big move. Got rid of your Costco card, paid the same amount of money for an Amazon Prime membership. And he says, yeah, and I'm surprised sometimes when I get a package and it's 1 day Prime, but it comes in, it's in the Amazon outer box, but the Walmart packaging on the inside. They don't even bother to take it out. They really are shameless, in just saying, we do whatever it takes to get it to you, even if we have to go buy it from a competitor. We just want to make you happy. And return policies, another way they're competing. People were afraid to buy clothes online for a long, long time. And that's really gone away because they've taken the risk out of it, and made clothing buying and other hard goods buying a lot easier. But yeah, the main battlefield where these guys are competing is on Prime delivery, 1 day shipping. Yes, in the back.
I just have a question to add on to that. As people are raising awareness about the conditions by which Amazon, like delivery, and also the warehouses, and also about packaging and waste and stuff like that, do you think that Amazon is going to change the way they do things whenever this awareness continues to raise?
I do, and I hope so. Yes, and I do think they are going to. I think they're going to have to, because otherwise, the risk of it's not just a bad PR problem; it's a problem. You can't pollute the earth. You can't waste the resources on getting it a little bit faster. So people do have to analyze that. People have to make sense.
Yeah, it seems to me that more and more people are starting to think about the actual cost of a thing versus like the
how fast it's getting to me or how cheap it's going to be. Start thinking about, okay, what are the consequences beyond me getting this thing quicker? And I don't know, but it seems that the way things are going, that's going to spread a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see how Amazon reacts to that.
I think that you are right. I think that there are people, particularly, you know, groups of people or a population of the population that's very concerned with it. But think about going back 30 or 40 years ago to FedEx. You know, FedEx was a business school project that got launched where the instructor famously failed the founder of FedEx, saying this will never work. You can't deliver mail to every zip code in the United States the next morning. And they figured out a way to do it with a hub and spoke technology. Walmart used that same type of hub and spoke technology. They have, I believe, 48 fulfillment centers across the U.S. just on grocery. So there's multiple in different states, but they're all around the locations. And it puts their trucks within a certain 100, 150 mile proximity of everywhere they have to get product to the store the next morning. So they can be really tight on inventory. They never have to overextend their purchasing. Those models really follow each other, and it laid down the basis for the strategy of how can Amazon do this. But I think your point, maybe to a bigger point, is just because you can doesn't mean you should. You know, yeah, we can get it there, and we can prove that we delivered it next morning, and here it is wrapped up in all this stuff, and you know, it's maybe not the best way. So the other thing is the no shipment minimums. When shipment minimums go down, that really contributes to the problem. So maybe Walmart will start to catch on to that and say, hey, people that are picking up in their cars are picking up larger orders. They're not going, oh, I forgot a bottle of this. Well, just Instacart it on over here, you know, or have it shipped prime. You know, from a packaging standpoint, even worse. But people who are got the whole shopping list and they're going to Walmart to pick it up on their way home or on Saturday or Sunday when they're not busy, you know, can do a lot of good to save that. I mean, we're in California. We're already doing a lot, you know, with charging for bags and making it a habit where people are bringing in reusable bags now. So I think a lot of the stuff that's happening is really great. And I think it is going to, e-commerce is going to have to listen. Yeah.
Well, I think the bigger question is social responsibility from the companies rather than, oh, thank you, from the companies themselves. I mean, if you consider that, you know, in the last, 20 or 30 years, everybody wants it quicker. I appreciate convenience. I appreciate technology. I order from Amazon, all that, okay? But there's a price to be paid, especially, I keep going back to this here in Southern California, and California in general, with the environment being as bad as it is. You know, people get killed on the freeways from 18-wheelers hauling cargo out of the port of LA and Long Beach, okay? Yeah. Especially right now, Christmas is coming, and all this stuff is coming in or has come in. Yeah. We're just flooding the streets and the freeways. Uber, Lyft, Amazon, you know, there has to be, is that part of the conversation, the social responsibility?
I think well, I don't know. I suspect that it is. And what I suspect is, because you touched on another problem, which is the transportation, right? All of these trucks, all of these cars, maybe even drones and automated cars. It almost seems like there needs to be a separate commercial freeway system. If the public is going to continue to drive cars, then do we want to continue to have them on the same road with automated cars? Now, I've seen some reports from experts that say, we'll be flying cars before, or there'll be automated flying cars before there's automated driving cars, because putting automated cars on the road with manually driven cars is a big problem, and manually driven trucks and commercial vehicles. So I think that you're probably going to see, you saw the Ocado warehouse and the smart design that went into that. Well, it doesn't just stop at the loading dock. Believe me, we just built a facility, and I was paying very close attention to how close we were to the main street, how hard it was going to be to get into the driveway. And I think when you start talking about going into these very congested areas like, you know, Manhattan and northern New Jersey, where they're always debating and having these discussions about where the next Amazon fulfillment center is going to be. It's great. It creates so many jobs. Yes, but you know, there's probably going to be some allowances for, there's dedicated lanes for those trucks to get off the freeway, get through that distribution center, and get out of the public's way fast as possible, making it less of a nuisance. I mean, we've dealt with this with airports in the past. some better than others. LAX is not a prime example, but they're fixing it. So, you know, it takes a long time to catch up.
You talked about in your very beginning you were a bagger, right? You started as
Yeah,
a courtesy
right.
clerk. And I think the grocery industry has been historically an area where you can start as a bagger with very limited and work your way up and learn the skills as you go. With so many really big changes happening in this industry, what skills do you think are going to be most important for these guys as they're entering the workforce and are trying to find those jobs in a very different landscape than it was, 30 years ago?
Understanding and being able to communicate with people, in my opinion, is by far the most important skill. People will always be, here. We can't completely eliminate us, and also understand the consumer's behavior as well, and be able to deal with their issues. So being able to relate to people, be able to communicate, listen and understand. The people skills is very important. I can't really say it enough. I mean, people skills lead to leadership skills. Leadership skills are what get you promoted and make you more successful in your career. I think early on you become a specialist with an eye on the bigger picture, so you understand where you fit. A good piece of advice that one of my college professors gave me, because I was a community college person myself. I went to Fullerton and then transferred to USC. Just got the undergrad and stopped there in business and marketing. But one of my USC professors, a great piece of advice that I'll never forget is, go to work for a big company while you're young. Learn what it's like to be part of a really big machine, and try to understand where you fit in that part. Not try to stay in your lane, but really try to understand it. So, and then becoming a specialist as you're early in your career, so that you know the most in the company about a particular subject or subjects, that gets you promoted. People skills get you into leadership. Okay. How are we doing on time? Do we have time for a couple more, or any comments? We're right there. Okay, perfect. Well, I've enjoyed having you. I've enjoyed being here. Truly an honor, guys. Thank you.